Hello and welcome to Talkabout. Today I will be having, I'll let my guests introduce themselves. Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll talk about what we're going to talk about afterwards.
Perfect. My name is Luba Kaplanskaya. I'm a fourth-year student here at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm here today to talk about the Ken Norris Center for Natural History, which is located here on campus at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm really happy to be here.
Great. Well, yeah, that about sums it up before we get into the actual conversation. Luba, what is natural history? Let's start with the sort of basic question, and then we'll go from there. What is natural history for, I guess, people out there that don't know? Because it sounds like something everyone should know.
Definitely. It's a super broad term, right? Natural history. The study of nature, the history of nature. Nature seems like it's been sort of infinite, right? We're here on such a interesting, beautiful planet for a very short amount of time, but yet nature and the planet continues to move forward, even when we're not here. So natural history is the scientific study of animals, plants, and the environment. But what makes natural history different than just environmental studies or environmental science or ecology is that it's really the study of animals, plants, and science, but it's focused on observations rather than just experiments. So it's really about sitting down for long periods of time and being extremely mindful and using all your energy to focus on your specific area of study.
I was reading up about Ken Norris before you got here, and it's interesting you mentioned sitting for long periods of time. It said one of his core teachings was overcoming the threshold of boredom. So I guess that means sitting in nature and being uncomfortable, but then moving past that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So what's been your experience with that? Have you struggled and then gotten better with sitting and just becoming, an observer? Or what's the process like when you do it?
So my favorite part about the idea and philosophy behind natural history is really closely intertwined for me with mindfulness and being truly present. I try to do that as many times throughout the day as I can, but it's pretty difficult with all the distractions that we have, especially having a device that tries to capture your attention in any way possible every second, 24 hours a day, because you're really the consumer and the product of media, right? Yeah. So I really admire natural history for the state that your mind enters when you can be fully present and realize the complete, utter beauty and awe that these things have that we just walk by on a day-to-day basis, flowering plants and bees buzzing around.
Yeah.
When you can really sit and look at them and understand the complexity that goes on around you every single second of the day that you have no control over and that you don't even maybe understand, it truly gives you this overall greater appreciation for life itself and for your life.
You mentioned the device thing, and that's good because I wanted to talk about that specifically. I think these days we talk a lot about the toxicity of technology, a lot in the sense of it's distracting you from work, which means it's distracting you from contributing to something that's turning a profit. And what I liked about when I was reading about Ken Norris, the sort of idea of overcoming the threshold of boredom isn't necessarily contributing to the idea that when you're not doing anything or when you're on your phone, you're not contributing to work, but you're truly just being present in a natural setting. And it's okay to not necessarily be contributing to something, but just observe, like you said, the beauty of it. And I was curious, what's your take on technology in that sense, in the relationship between how it is with us working and how it is with us just being distracted in nature?
Definitely. I think something that you mentioned that was really interesting to me is the idea of boredom. And I think that by having these devices and the internet and this access to it 24/7, we don't allow ourselves to be bored, and we view boredom as something that needs to be avoided, and we can take ourselves away from boredom instantly. Oh, you're bored? Just hop on your phone, talk to someone. But really, with boredom, I think comes concentration and super thinking, right? So thinking for a long amount of time deeply without distractions, which is what arises to new ideas. And we can't think of new ideas to better ourselves, to better the planet, to make profits or anything that you're trying to do unless you have ideas for that. If you're just living in this cycle day to day and not thinking of new ways, new innovations, then you're just going to be stuck where you are and you can't move forward.
Yeah.
So technology with natural history, there's photography, right? That's a great aspect of natural history. I know a lot of people that use film photography, for example, to capture extremely beautiful pieces of art. And also you can take photos of a place and then draw it or paint it later when you're not going to be there. That's extremely useful. But in general, I think that my favorite part about natural history is how you are not on your devices and you're not on your computer. It has nothing to do with emails. It has nothing to do with interacting with other people. It's just you being present in the world.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the activities that the Ken Norris Center engages in? Because I want to get more into the ideas that we were talking about because I think it's super interesting. But I think we should also talk about the work that you're doing because you do have a position there, correct?
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. So I am the CUIP coordinator for the Ken Norris Center, the Chancellor's Undergraduate Internship Program intern. I'm the outreach coordinator. And I think that before I get into talking about what the Ken Norris Center does, I would love to give a little bit more background on Ken Norris himself because he, the center is named after him. He's pretty significant. So he was a professor here at UC Santa Cruz. He was born in 1924 and died in 1998. So I never got to know him, of course. And he was a groundbreaking marine mammal and marine animal in general researcher here at UC Santa Cruz. And he was a leader and an activist and a really charismatic individual for the university itself, but also for the pioneering of this idea of natural history as a study, intertwining and connecting the ideas of art, science, politics, history all together. He started the focus on field biology and research. He started the Long Marine Lab, which is down at Coastal Biology Building, which is the EEB major building off campus. Mm-hmm. And he had the largest grad school lab here at the time. He was basically a fighter for the preservation of land here on campus and throughout California. And much of what we see today around campus, upper campus, right, when you go for a walk, when you could cut from over here to the back of the trailer park and then go up to Wilder Ranch is because of Ken Norris, because he was a fighter for preserving those lands. And he actually started the UC Natural Reserve System, which is a system of over 40 lands throughout the UC system. These lands are extremely valuable and important, not only for students and researchers who want to go there and conduct natural history or scientific observations, but also for people of all backgrounds, of artists, of policymakers who want to go there and experience these natural lands that are strictly for research and the enjoyment of the public, right? Mm-hmm. Of people who want to contribute to that. And this is UC Santa Cruz. The upper campus is a natural reserve. There's Rancho Marina. There's one in Big Sur, Big Creek. There's the Mojave Desert. And it's really thanks to Ken Norris that we have these lands because he really pressured and got the UC Regents to sign off on preserving these lands. And since then, the lands have increased and all the UCs share ownership of those lands. So it's really wonderful, all the positive impacts that he created that are still here today. So the Ken Norris Center, which is named after him, mm-hmm. was started in 2014 by a large donation from someone who was a student of Ken Norris. And they wanted to start this center because basically as a thanks to Ken Norris for the way that he impacted their lives and countless amounts of people's lives. I always interact with community members and people that live in Santa Cruz that have very fond, wonderful memories with Ken Norris because he also started this program, which is still here today, called the Natural History Field Quarter. It's every single spring. It's going to be starting here at UCSC in a week when spring quarter starts. And basically, the current instructor, Chris, who's also the director of the Ken Norris Center, takes a group of students and they basically go camping for the entire quarter at the UC reserves. And they spend a lot of time learning about how to conduct natural history. They spend a lot of time by themselves looking at the environment and really observing their lands. And they also learn about land management and land use and the history of people who used to own those lands. And they have native speakers come and different scientists come. I haven't participated in that program, but from what I've heard from it, it's truly a life-changing experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that the Ken Norris Center does. In general, the biggest part of the Norris Center is that it's the school's natural history museum. So there are over 300,000 specimens, like a natural history museum, right? If you were to go to the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles or in any major city that has one, they're specimens of deceased plants or animals, and they are used as specimens for research and for art. So many people can't ever see an owl or an albatross right in front of them unless maybe you work at a zoo. But these animals are hard to see, and we have specimens there for people to look at, to learn from, to draw, to paint. We offer a lot of different courses. So some of the courses that we offer, like I mentioned, the Natural History Field Quarter, which you apply for in the fall. There's field research classes. We have, for example, a natural history illustrations class this quarter where students get to choose what animals or plants they're interested in, and they learn how to draw them and how to accurately represent them. So we have those classes. Yeah. There's a lot of different things that the Norris Center does.
But what do you do there?
Right. What do I do there?
Yeah.
I'm the outreach coordinator. So I do things like this, so outreach and advertising. And my goal is to really let people know about this center and this resource that is completely free and not only should be used because, well, it's free and it's right here on campus, but also I think it can be extremely beneficial for different students from all majors because we also offer scholarships and awards for students to do their own projects. So I have a wide variety of tasks that I do. Obviously, like I mentioned, a lot of marketing, some tabling that I do to let students know. I talk at events and I work at events. Sometimes I table at the farmers market. I do lots of large-scale projects that are designed to expand the Norris Center and allow more students to know about the Norris Center. So I'm working on redesigning the website right now so that it's more condensed and so that people can find information as effectively as possible. I work on their blog. So the Norris Center has a blog, and I've written a post about the taxidermy group so far, which is a group of students that works on turning the deceased bodies of animals into specimens that everybody can observe and learn from. And I recently interviewed someone who is a volunteer at the Norris Center who runs the herbarium group, which is a group of community volunteers that work with the plant collection and make sure that it's organized and maintained. I'm also doing this new development that I recently thought of last week. I've been really into personal and professional development for all the students, staff, volunteer, and community members at the Norris Center because I want it to be a place not only about natural history and all those aspects, but somewhere where people can go, be a part of, and learn and grow into the people that they want to become. As a part of this series, I had the director of diversity, so Teresa Linda Schultz. Linda Schultz, yeah.
Okay.
She was a speaker, and at our class, she came and led a workshop on diversity and inclusivity in the natural world, right? So natural history and the environment is sometimes thought of something that is only reserved to upper class people or white people, but it's actually not true that people from all different backgrounds are interested in natural history and want to be a part of it. So it was fantastic because she came and taught us how to really foster an environment where people can come in and feel like they're represented, feel like they're included. From that workshop, I'm also working on creating a diversity wall where we're going to have different alumni from the Norris Center and famous figures in the natural history world and have profiles on them so that when people come in there, they feel like they're being represented in the center. Because for now, we basically just have Ken Norris, who is a white man, and people might not feel represented by that very specific representation.
Yeah, definitely.
So a part of this professional development, personal growth workshop series, I'm also going to have Nancy Heischman, I believe is her name, probably messing up pronunciation. She's the director of conflict resolution here at UC Santa Cruz. I have met with her a few times, and she is an incredible resource for resolving conflict for people. How do people voice their concerns, and how do they move past that instead of just responding with anger, right, or other secondary emotions to fear. So she's going to come and give us a workshop in the spring, and then I'm also drafting a communications workshop that I'll be leading myself, where I'm going to be talking about public speaking and advertising and how to really talk about something that you care about and not have it be something scary or nerve-wracking that you have to plan out a million times and not be able to do. So I want to empower the students and the staff and everybody there to be able to talk about the Norris Center once I graduate and I'm no longer going to be the CUIP intern, but to continue to invite students and staff and community members of different backgrounds to come to the Norris Center.
You mentioned a lot in there that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I think first, Ken Norris had this belief that you shouldn't pursue something if you're not really passionate about it. So how did you come to the Ken Norris Center? What's your relationship with the natural history? Just anywhere. Why is that something that you're passionate about? Is it something that you're passionate about?
Definitely. My earliest recalls of being in the environment and truly appreciating it is when my sister started to take me camping when I was younger, about 8. My sister's always been a positive older figure for me that exposed me to different environments and hobbies that I wouldn't have necessarily had anyone else that would have introduced me to them. Before I entered college, I really had an appreciation for environmental studies and science and thinking about what gets me the most excited when I'm in my day-to-day life. When do I feel the most alive and the most excited? The answer in my head was animals. When I get to see animals, I was like, what do I watch when I'm bored? I always watch Planet Earth and different documentaries on animals, so I should study animals. And I was a volunteer in Los Angeles for Tree People for a few years, a supervisor there, planting trees and removing non-native invasive species. So when I came to UC Santa Cruz, I decided that I'm going to study ecology and evolutionary biology. I did some marvelous field courses. I did the super course where I went to Baja California in Mexico near La Paz and lived on a 1-acre island for 2 weeks doing research there. I last year was in Costa Rica studying tropical biology and conservation. Also, before I entered UC Santa Cruz, I participated on Wilderness Orientation, which is a program that is put on by the Recreation Department at Opers by the gym. And that program is a 10-day sea kayaking or backpacking expedition that incoming freshmen and transfer students partake in. So it was through the Recreation Department that I found out about the Ken Norris Center. I, through there, met Chris Lay, who's the director of the Ken Norris Center, and I always knew that I wanted to do natural history field quarter. Those two departments are very closely related, the Recreation Department and the Ken Norris Center, both about the outdoors and natural history and nature. I wasn't able to do the natural history field quarter due to the time constraint that I had with being a double major with ecology, evolutionary biology, and psychology. So in terms of field courses, I was trying to choose the one that gave me the most bang for my buck, the most upper divisions. Ended up doing the super course and Costa Rica program. But since I wasn't able to do natural history field quarter, I knew that I still wanted to be a part of the Ken Norris Center and give back and experience all the different programs and aspects that it has. So that was when I decided to apply to the Chancellor's Undergraduate Internship Program. I was in communication with Chris because I would work at the Recreation Department, and he knew of me and he knew that I was a great ambassador for the Recreation Department, and those skills are really important because that's what they were looking for the outreach coordinator, someone that's able to talk about something that they love. And that's the case with me.
You mentioned in there you did a program in Baja, right? And in Costa Rica. And then you also mentioned earlier about Linda Scholes and bringing that sort of diversity in natural history. So I want to talk about that. How do you reconcile within natural history going to a place that formerly had indigenous or Native American people living on it and had, a relationship where they were taking from the land that they were living on and like using it to live themselves, and you being there now and studying it? What's the relationship between that and what you're doing now, or what natural history is currently?
I recently took the People of Color Sustainability Coalition, sent out a survey to everyone on campus, and they do this really fantastic survey every year. I highly recommend that people fill it out. And from their survey last year, they found out that people of color are as interested in sustainability and the environment as white people. So in that survey, they had a question that was talking about land use and land management and in the land that Native people own, and how much are we taught about that in our studies. And I said, not much. I've only really had a speaker talk about the native land here from UC Santa Cruz at an event from the sustainability office because I used to work there last year. I know that, as I mentioned, in Natural History Field Quarter, they have speakers come that are part of Native American culture and identification, and I regret that I don't have as much exposure to that, and I think that it's really interesting and important for people to know. I also go to city council meetings, which I love very much. They're really interesting. And during public comment, someone mentioned, it was about housing, and they were saying that, this isn't even our house. This is the land of the tribe of people that used to live here, and it's their land. So we can't even be saying, no, this is my property, my house, because it's not even really our house. We took it away from other people. Mm-hmm. So reconciliation with that, I think I, as many others, just need more education on that. And I shouldn't expect that someone's going to educate me on that. I need to be educating myself on that. And that is something that I'm missing right now, is that information. You
mentioned the earlier project where you were looking at a tree and birds for just 2 weeks.
It was for 2 weeks, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I would imagine that one involved a lot of crossing the threshold of boredom, because it sounds like something that can get boring very quickly. But within that, I mean, what were your observations? What did you find? Did you see a specific bird that always came to that tree, but it had different sort of patterns in how it would eat fruit? Or what's the process of doing that?
Definitely. The process was really sitting by at this tree that was near a market, near the homestay where I was staying at, and their dog would come and visit me. So I would sit with my binoculars and a notebook and a pen and pet this dog while looking at the tree. And what I found was that the most common bird that was there, called a grackle, was the most common visitor by far. And because it was the most common species of bird that was there, it also displayed the most dominance towards other birds. So I witnessed interactions where the grackle would sort of make vocalizations or try to intimidate other smaller birds that were on the tree in order to get the most fruits.
I see animals a lot in nature, and I don't really have any emotions attached to them. But I would imagine if you were like looking at this particular bird, you developed a relationship with it in some way. Right?
Definitely. There's a lot of birds in Costa Rica, so while doing that project, it was very rewarding for me to walk around and see all the different beautiful birds. They have parrots and all sorts of colorful, fascinating birds. And I would always notice the grackle, how I would always see it every day no matter what, but then other birds were a lot harder to see, such as like an emerald toucanet, which is like a small toucan. Mm-hmm. They're super pretty. And I think that my favorite part, I guess, also to parallel with this, about studying animals and animal systems is that there's a lot of parallels with people, I think, and animals. I mean, we are animals. Yeah. And seeing the grackle just made me think of how people that are in the most abundance can show the most power and be the most dominating compared to other birds that are rarer, perhaps.
Yeah.
We have people and we have our minds, and then we have our natural environment that we interact with. And as people, we create all these different subdivisions that you can study, right? Economics and history, and we create all these different categories. But in reality, in my day-to-day life, when I'm walking around, I'm just really looking at people and talking to people, and I'm really seeing the environment. So that relationship between everything that I'm seeing in the world helps me understand better what my place is in this world.
How do you not let the anxiety get to you? Because, I mean, I love going camping, but then I think about how, in a few months I have to go back to school and I have my job and all my classes to worry about. How do you not let that encroach into that space and poison it?
I, of course, but I do struggle with anxiety. And for me, it's been digging deeper into my reasons of anxiety and where they come from. I believe that thinking too much about the future is what will cause people to be anxious. So being able to take yourself and revert yourself back to the present moment, to what is happening currently and what is important in your life right now, is how to stop the anxiety, right? Because I'm here right now in this interview and nothing else exists besides this right now. Things could be in the back of my head I could be anxious about, for example, maybe exams or coming up work or deadlines, but that doesn't exist right now because all that exists is me and you talking here. And so I feel calm and I don't feel anxious about it.
Yeah.
So the times when I find myself feeling the most anxious is when I'm just overwhelming my mind with all the things that I have to do and get done. So what helps me is saying to myself, if I only do these 2 things today and go to bed, will I be happy with myself? Choosing those 2 priorities and getting the rest done slowly and just focusing on it one by one.
Yeah.
And I think that there's just a fine balance between over planning for the future, but also being responsible with your plans in the future. Do I spend every single day looking at my Google Calendar for the next week, for today, for weeks on end, for scheduling, for planning? Do I go back and check my emails, make sure I didn't miss anything, any events or deadlines or replying back to someone? Yes, but there's a balance between where I do that to be responsible and on top of what I need to do versus using that as a distraction to not do the things that are actually important, which I think a lot of us do. Is just, checking email is being productive, but what are you actually getting done? There's not actually anything that's coming out of that.
Yeah. So we're in a building right now, and everything around us has been made by a person. And outside of us, just a few feet away, is a tree. It's like natural and it's been there forever. So do you feel any enmity when you walk into a building and you see everything that's been made by a person and how it's ruined the land? Are you angry at that? And I'm not suggesting that you should be. What are the emotions that come when you look at something that's in the industrial sense been made?
I definitely don't get angry about that. And that's also where my psychology part comes in, is that I'm extremely appreciative. And I also marvel at humans and the possibility and the accomplishments that human beings can do. So no, I've definitely never seen a man-made structure and thought this makes me angry. And I think that it's a large spectrum on that sense because, for example, there's the environmental health safety building that's being built near Kresge right now, where they had to tear down some trees. And one side of the story is that students or people will feel angry at that for that land being taken away and being used for a building. But I think that buildings are extremely important, and having an environmental health safety department is a lot more important than having the redwood trees sit there. So I definitely don't feel angry towards people or their development. There just needs to be a clear balance. I really appreciate national parks and, for example, the UC reserves and preserved land that is there for the enjoyment and recreational use for people and also science. But there needs to be a balance. We have to upkeep the national parks that we have now, but we don't need to tear down, communities where people have their apartments and buildings in order to make them parks.
So do you see it as more of a negotiation with, as humans are existing on this earth, in the timeline that we will be existing here? Is it a negotiation between what needs to be fulfilled in terms of people growing, populations growing, and supplying them with food and making sure that they're alive, and the natural world? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a balance, and I can see a lot of fellow students or colleagues or staff and faculty in the natural sciences, in the environmental and ecology field, who devote their entire lives towards the preservation of certain species, right? Ken Norris devoted his entire life, you could say, towards the creation of the natural reserves and the Long Marine Lab, which is a research laboratory for mostly marine mammals, and the Ken Norris Center. So there needs to be people that devote their lives for that, if that's their passion and that's what they find to be their life purpose. But also it's just a give and take. There's a balance. I cannot say that I find myself on either side of the spectrum.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we talk about nature and how we relate to it. But how do you see nature relating to us? Climate change. Maybe eventually it will all die, but the world will still be here and nature will self-correct, right? What are its thoughts on humans? What would their thoughts be?
I think that the greed and gluttony and over consumerism that humans possess, which is not beneficial in the long run for anybody, not for other people, the wealthy 1% controlling 99% of the wealth. How it's proven that once you reach a certain threshold of money, more money does not make your life any significantly better. It doesn't make a difference on your quality of life, but that greed of wanting as much as possible is not beneficial for anybody, especially the environment and nature. I think that if plants could talk, they would say that we need to share more and be more mindful of our actions and the broader effect of them. I think that in nature, there are sharks that eat other animals, and there are plants that get eaten, and everybody at some point will be used as energy for another being. But it's just the level and the evenness of that distribution needs to make sense so that it can replenish itself and keep going, right? So if you shoot off a population of wolves and then there's an overpopulation of deer or elk, the wolves were there to make sure that the deer or the elk didn't overpopulate and then start eating all the grass, and then there's no more grass, and then the deer start dying because the wolves were shot, the predator that was high up in the chain. So I think that we as humans were the top predator. We are overusing so many of our resources and not allowing this natural flow and system of nature to replenish itself, which ultimately is going to probably be the end of us because of mostly cleanliness and water and air. And I think that all these respiratory issues that people develop and other medical issues that people have from tumors in their cells not dividing properly and all of that comes from the toxicity that we're putting into the environment, but the over toxicity, like nature can handle it. It's, she's the mother of all, I guess. Yeah. She can replenish it and recycle it and reuse it and get rid of it, but we're just putting so much garbage and gunk out there that we're really not understanding the effects of that.
So what is it about animals that you like particularly? What's your draw to them?
Simply, I like looking at them. I like what they look like. I think they just look so different and so interesting. I also like looking at people, obviously. Everybody looks different and dresses different and acts different and talks different, but animals are just on another level of looking different. So from planet Earth and from my observation, watching planet Earth and from my observations in nature, where that all stems from is I genuinely enjoy looking at them. I like looking at squirrels that run by, and raccoons on campus, and deer. Just stopping and seeing what they look like creates a sense of pleasure for me. And I don't know where that comes from exactly, except for just fascination with how many different variations of beings there are on this earth, things that have life in them and live their lives, how different they can look. And then of course, on shows like Planet Earth, there's a lot of different incredible things that animals do that are mind-blowing, but day to day I just enjoy looking at them. Really is, I think, where it comes down to it. They're fascinating. And then I always think about, in terms of people and socially, all these constructs and concepts that we have, is that people really are motivated by this natural way of life, how all other animals are. Like, people really just need food and comfort and, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But really our purpose here in life is to reproduce biologically. And so I also find that interesting to think about how people live their day-to-day lives and the actions that they do, when biologically your brain or your genes are really like, oh, we need to continue your genes and continue the species of humankind, right? So I think that's kind of also the interesting parallel that I see between animals and people. We're still social creatures that need the support from people around us, just like animals have to live usually in social environments to support each other. And how really we're all extremely scared of death and dying, because what that means biologically is that you don't exist anymore.
Yeah. What's your favorite animal?
I really have to say, I mean, just the most basic answer you could get in the world is my cat. I've had her for 19 years, so since I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
And she's just my favorite. She's my favorite animal because of the emotional connection that I have with her. But in terms of the most fascinating or beautiful animal, I couldn't choose one because there's more than I even know of.
Do you think that domestication harms animals and what they stand for, exist for? What's your thought?
Domestication is fascinating. I think that in the benefit of the broadly, it's beneficial for, I mean, the animal gets fed, doesn't have to work, and will die by natural causes. So in the sense that the animal is able to live usually, I think for a lot of animals, a decent life, and also not get eaten by another animal as a way of death, not get used to be someone else's meal, is beneficial for the animal. And I definitely see the emotional support and therapeutic support that animals can have on people. But domestication as a whole is fascinating. It's interesting how we take animals and we just tell them you can't leave, right? Like your dog can try to leave or hop the fence and you just say, no, you can't leave, or it'll leave and you try to find it and then you bring it back and you say, you can't leave.
Yeah.
Are we using modern form animal slaves? I don't know. But in the sense, if the animal is getting fed and treated and loved and not abused, which definitely I think that people as a whole sometimes can suffer from trauma or abuse and then use that as anger towards other people or other animals or children or any other awful thing because of the own pain that they have inside themselves. As long as that doesn't happen with animals and you only have them from a sense of love, I don't see domestication as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But also monetarily, do we spend more money on protein for our dogs in America than we could use for feeding other people? Yeah, and is that right? I don't think so. But those people that spend their money on dog food wouldn't necessarily be spending that money on other people. So if they're spending it towards their dog, then that's what they wish to do with it.
Taxidermy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that in the setting of natural history? Do you wait for an animal to die and then taxidermize it? What's the philosophy behind that? Do you kill the animal so you can taxidermize it? And what are the sort of struggles between people in dealing with that?
Yeah, so the philosophy at the Norris Center, and I'm pretty sure most natural history museums, is that you find an animal that has been deceased for its own causes. Sometimes those reasons can be from humans, from hunters or people running animals over or things like that. But no, you definitely don't kill an animal for the sake of having it be a specimen. That's something that's important. And the relationship with it is that, well, shout out to all the people that bring in these animals, because all the species that we have were really from people who saw a dead animal, picked it up, put it in a bag or something, and then brought it over to the Norris Center. And I've definitely seen animals before, and my supervisor, Chris Lay, has said, oh, keep a trash bag in your car, in case you ever see a really cool animal that we don't have, just bring it over. And I wouldn't do that. That's not my style. That's not something I want to do. So I've seen people bring in boxes of animals, and they're out for a hike usually, or they're driving, and they see a run over animal, and they bring it in. And I think that the beauty of that is that we can use these bodies for science and for natural history. Of course, they could also be left out in nature and eaten by animals and be decomposed and used as energy for the soil or for rats or other birds. But there's definitely a proportion of it that I think is pretty sustainable, right? We don't over collect specimens that we already have. I can tell you off the bat, if there's a deceased raccoon, we don't ask for that, or we don't take it and we don't make it into taxidermy. There are tons of raccoons, I'm sure, at the Norris Center. The relationship with that, I think I've had a really interesting time interviewing the taxidermy team, because I was asking them those questions. How do you do that? How do you do this internship? Because a lot of people also don't wear gloves at the taxidermy thing, and they're just with their hands are digging into these bodies, and they just enjoy it. They find it as like a puzzle, because it's a very systematic process where you have to make sure that you don't harm the animal in this way and remove certain parts, and then you stuff it with certain materials and you have to let it dry. And I asked them what their favorite part was, and some people said that the final product is their favorite part, because you really see this gorgeous, huge barn owl, right? That a child could come in, because there's also the bird school project which works with the Norris Center, and this child from the school could come and never even have a clue what a barn owl looks like, and now see this marvelous, fascinating animal right before their eyes. So the relationship with it, I think, is complicated, and to each their own. I highly appreciate the taxidermy team for the work that they do, but I personally have not had an interest in dissecting and stuffing an animal.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in the interview, and I think you emailed this to me, the Ken Norris Center is one of the only places that you can go see an albatross or an owl up close.
Right.
Apart from like a zoo. But I'm curious, why would somebody want to do that? Or what's the benefit in being very up close with an albatross or an owl? I mean, like, I would enjoy it, I know, but why do I enjoy that? What am I getting from that? Because it's not something that very clearly is fulfilling a need in my system, I think, but I'm sure there's something there.
Right. I think that also goes deeply into what I said earlier about why I like animals, which is just looking at them. And I think it's really the realization of the different creations that nature has, and just how vast those differences are with these creations. So an albatross wingspan is some ridiculous amount of feet, and to just see that right before your eyes, realize that there's this bird that flies over oceans, and the different interesting facts about it, like they're monogamous and they'll only have one mating partner, and if something happens to their partner, they won't find another one. And just learning about maybe where do people get their ideas of monogamy from, maybe from certain social structures of animals. And I think that it's important, because you can't love something and you can't appreciate it if you don't know what it looks like. So you can see on the internet, save the lion, save the safari, save this, save that, save the polar bears. You can see these sad photos of polar bears starving and being so skinny on these melting ice caps. But how can you really say, I care about this, if you're not already interested in it, or if you haven't seen it? So I think seeing these animals up close gives you a better understanding of why they're special, why they're important and unique, and why we have a sort of social responsibility to do what we can, at least individually, to be at least more mindful and share this space, which is the planet. Yeah. And if you just never see that, and you live in a busy city and you don't have the privilege to go out and go hiking or go camp. But even if the point of that is that even if you go hiking and camping, you still won't see an animal that close, right? Because they run away and they're hard to see. So just seeing that animal up close can really, I think, ignite this sense of appreciation, and I think mostly just awe of the natural world and of this planet.
Definitely. Now that makes me think of, because you mentioned looking at pictures and how it's not the same as being in person. So like Walter Benjamin's Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. And he talks about how an original work of art has an aura that fills you with something that was intended by the creator. But if you look at a picture, this was written like the 1940s, so you had no idea about the internet, but now you can look at a picture online and it's not the same as necessarily being there and receiving something from it. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting, and that relationship between seeing something and not really getting it, but then going there and really getting it. Which brings me to, I think, my last question probably, and then I'll ask you whatever you want to talk about. A lot of the times in natural history, you're out in nature, right? And so you get that sense of awe, right? What's the presence of God there, or religion? Because if you're in nature and you're witnessing something, I don't know, beautiful, and there's organization to it and there's patterns, what's the makeup there between God and nature? And personally for you, and just among other natural historians?
I can't say that I believe in God. I think that God in itself, as the representation of the Father of Jesus Christ, or whatever the normal idea of God is. I can't say that I believe that that is what's going on here. I definitely think of my spirituality and religious sense very closely connected to nature, in the sense that there is, I would call it an energy. There's energy that's controlling this earth. There's something that's powering what is happening on this earth. So physicists or scientists could say it's biologists could say it's ATP, it's the energy in your cells, or you could say that it's protons and electrons that make up atoms that move everything around, or it's gravity, whatever it can be. There's a lot of energy that's making things happen. And this energy, you can feel it within yourself. You can feel it in your mind with your thoughts. You can feel it with how motivated or excited you are, or how sad you're feeling, or how anxious you're feeling, or when you go to different cities, you experience their energies. So I'm from Los Angeles, and a lot of people don't like Los Angeles, but I think that some people don't like it because of the energy. There's a very fast-paced, very rush energy there, and a lot of people love Santa Cruz because it's a very slow, relaxing, enjoyable, peaceful energy. There's not this rush to get everything done and become a superstar or a movie star.
Yeah.
So when I'm in nature, I really think in general as the energy being the universe, whatever created that, however that was created, which was created by energy, right? The Big Bang, and then everything started colliding and forming and morphing. So personally, when I journal, for example, and I do different affirmations and manifestations, and I write out my thoughts, my ideas, my goals, and I definitely show gratitude and try to have gratitude. And every morning when I wake up, I try to say 5 things that I'm grateful for before I start my day. Don't do it every day, but I try to. And I think I address those desires and that gratitude to the universe as a whole, which can be everything, right? The universe is my mom because I started in her stomach. The universe is the earth. The universe is the trees and the water that I drink every day, and like my body that functions everything and makes my life happen. So that's how I would say is my relationship to religion and spirituality. And I think that everybody has the right to believe in any religion or idea that they want to, but the point is that every person needs to have faith and hope in something.
Yeah.
And whatever that idea is different for a lot of people, and people can hate people for them being different than them. But the point is that you all believe in something, the something that is beyond your control. And it doesn't matter what name you put on it. You can call it whatever God is from your religion or practice your religion. But the fundamental idea behind that is that we have no idea why we're here. We have no idea what we're going to do in the future here. But we know that there is something that's way beyond our control that makes things happen, whether it's things that I see in my dreams that then come true, whether it's when I feel deja vu and I feel I've seen this before exactly and I don't know why, or whether it's the things that I manifest and then they come true exactly how I said, but there's clearly something that's beyond our control that I'm grateful for because it makes life happen. And whatever you decide to call it is totally and free up to you, but it's all the same thing, I think. And it makes no sense when people are upset at others or mad at others for calling it that thing, because it's all the same thing. You can call it whatever you want, but we're all talking about the same exact thing.
There was this movie that came out last year. Maybe you saw it, called Annihilation. No? Okay. And a big sort of idea or plot in the movie, plot point, was that there was something mutating all the nature around it and sort of made it at the same time very, very beautiful, but very deadly. And I think I was reading up on natural history and naturalism. A lot of it is talking about how beautiful nature is and sitting in nature and you recognize the beauty. But what's the relationship between also recognizing that in nature things can, I guess in the traditional sense, deviate from that and be ugly.
Oh, definitely.
And be hideous. And there's murder and, there's plants that smell like corpses and alligators who like kill you. What's your take on that?
Definitely. And just referring back to this balance and this give and take of everything. I am not someone who is fearless of nature. I love swimming, but being in the ocean, swimming in waves can also be terrifying. Do I still go and swim in the ocean? Yes, but it can be extremely terrifying, especially. I experienced the closest feeling of drowning that I ever had once, and that can definitely awaken you and realize the power that nature has that is so beyond you. And I think that a lot of people can get so engrossed in nature that they forget the danger behind it. But for many people, at least I've been watching some videos or seeing some movies about rock climbers, because I went to this film festival in Santa Cruz that was about outdoor films. And rock climbers, such as Alex Honnold, that climb without ropes and everything, do not fear death at all, because for them, not climbing and not being completely exposed to nature and all the elements is not living. There was this other woman who had broken parts of her bones, like 46. Had 46 times where she had hurt or broken something tremendously. But as soon as she recovers, she just gets back onto the rocks, and she was like jumping off of cliffs. I forgot what the name is, but like you climb to the top and then you just jump off with a parachute. And I think that there's something within us that is our desire, and we don't know where that desire comes from, and we can't explain it. But for people that have nature as their ultimate be-all, where they need to be all the time, the only thing that makes sense to them, they can forget or just not care about the danger that nature can possess. And in some unfortunate cases, they die, but they would not, if you were to magically get them back to life and say, hey, would you redo something or be safer? They would say no, because that's their internal desire that they don't know where that even came from. Yeah. So your question exactly of the ugly side of nature can definitely be there. And something that is one of my favorite parts when I go camping, especially on longer camping trips, is really letting myself submerge into the feeling of being uncomfortable, because that's where I feel I have the most growth. So when I'm out camping and I don't have a shower or running water or a toilet, or it's cold and I don't have my moisturizer or my blankets and my pillows or all these things that I can do every day that make me feel good, really getting into that uncomfortability and still finding how I can make myself comfortable and feel happy and grateful, even when I don't have my typical resources around me, is how I think I grow the most, by letting myself step into uncomfortability and letting myself step into fear and realizing what I can learn from that and grow higher from that.
Do natural historians fear death, or do they see it as you eventually returning energy into the world and just becoming a part of a food chain or something?
I think everybody fears death. I think that that's just in our reptilian brain, something that's the end-all be-all, again, with maybe our genes not being able to be passed down. But I can definitely say that everybody probably fears death. It just can be masked to an extent. And I think there's a huge range between natural historians and, rock climbers that will climb up without anything attached to them and all of that. But yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, you don't have to have all the answers. And with that, is there anything I didn't ask you that you would like to talk about, or anything you want to mention before we come to a close here?
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. So I would love to give a little bit more information to people that would be interested in finding out about the Norris Center, because they do take volunteers and interns. We had like 30 last quarter, and a lot of community members are involved. Last quarter we put on like an art show that was called the Reserves of Inspiration. So that was just an art show where anybody from Santa Cruz or visiting could come and enjoy the art that students, staff, alumni, and community members made that was inspired by the UC Reserves. So that was a great exhibit for people to see how these preserved lands can really positively affect your artistic side for expression. And there are just a lot of really great classes that people should take if they can. Like in fall of 2019, there's going to be the Natural History of Campus class, an ornithology class, which is the study of birds, the study of mammals called mammalogy class. And we're having some upcoming events like an alumni weekend, open house. We have workshops and we have awards, money that people can apply for grants and use towards a project. The Norris Center Student Project Award is due the 5th week of every quarter. You can get up to $1,000. There's a science and art residency program where artists get paid for their time. So like a faculty can be writing a textbook and they need someone who's going to do some illustrations for them. So these students can team up with the Norris Center and get paid for their work, and then it could be published in a textbook. We're also going to have 2 summer classes called Nature Illustration and the Natural History of the Campus class, and also come by to the Norris Center, which is located in Natural Sciences 2, and send us an email at norris@ucsc.edu. You can also just look up the Norris Center.ucsc.edu. And I would also just love to encourage people on a broader sense to go to city council meetings if they can. It's very interesting and fascinating to hear people speak about the city and their concerns. And I'd love to end a quote from Ken Norris,
Please.
Which I found online. So Ken Norris said, "I know in my bones that we are all of this home of ours. Crickets, columbines, jellyfish, redwood trees, frogs, lichens, desert moss, spiders, and all the rest. We are relatives, and my kinship with all the earth's biota, even the simplest flatworm, does not degrade me. Instead, it makes you and me miraculous. I know this because I walk in the midst of beauty and love, a perfection of sand, stones, water, and life."
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Luba Kaplanskaya?
Luba Kaplanskaya, yes.
Luba Kaplanskaya, for joining me today and talking with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
It's such a pleasure.
It was a fascinating conversation, and I definitely want to check out the Norris Center now, because I didn't know that we had that.
Yeah, come by.
Yeah, all right. Have a nice day.
Thank you, you too.